Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. This one is going to be hopefully quite short because I want you guys to have this class to do some research for your projects. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys a quick update on the project, a little bit more detail on kind of the time frame you should be targeting as well as the due date. Um, and then I can provide more updates in the next lesson or in a couple of weeks from now, just so that you guys have more information if anything comes up, if there seems to be something that I've missed. So anyway, in this video, it's just going to be a few slides just to give you guys a little bit of an update of some more information that you can use. But there won't be a lesson after that. And the reason for that is that I am in the middle of my final exam season. So a little bit short on time, so I thought I'll record just an update on the project, and then you guys can use the science class where you're watching this video to work on the project, and then there'll be more actual lessons, more actual content for next week. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So this slide is copied over just from the last lesson. With an overview of the kinds of things that you should be looking at while you're working through your research and designing your presentation or poster for this project. So just a quick recap. There was a list of space missions, space probes in the last lesson with, it wasn't a comprehensive list, but it had a list of several probes that you could look into for this project. So some of you have gotten in touch with me and told me which probe you would like to study, and that's great. For those of you that haven't, please let me know as soon as possible which probe you've chosen. Hopefully you've at least picked one by now, so it should be fairly quick and straightforward to let me know which one you've chosen. If you haven't chosen one yet, please do that as soon as possible so that you have enough time to actually do the project. So anyway, the details of the project, your responsibility is to create a presentation or a poster. So you could make it like a PowerPoint presentation or a Prezi if any of you have used that before, but you don't have to. So it could be PowerPoint, could be Prezi, could be an actual poster like a Bristol board, hold it up in front of the class and talk about it. Whatever is most comfortable for you. In this video, I'm just going to go over sort of like what you should be aiming for in terms of time. And it's not going to be a super strict time constraint. If you end up being a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, that's okay. But it's just to give you a rough idea because you might be sitting here like, should it be 4 minutes? Should it be 14 minutes? We're going to go through all of that. So there are these 5 points here of the things that you should address. So what instruments are or were on board the space probe that you've chosen to study? When did it launch? What did we learn from it? So what did the probe discover that we didn't know before, and how was that useful to us? Did the probe take any pictures? For all the ones that that I put on the list, I think there are pictures, but I know I've had one request for a mission that doesn't have any pictures as of right now. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. But if the mission that you've chosen has photos associated with it, feel free to include some of those. Actually, please do include some of those because pictures of space and other planets and stuff is always very exciting. And how did the mission come to an end? So, did the probe drift off into space? Is it in orbit around something? Did it crash on the surface of some planet somewhere? And when did that happen, if it's already happened so far? So like when was the end of the mission? Things like that. And there was a bonus task at the end of your presentation. If you have some extra time, if you want to do it, come up with an idea of what you would like a space mission of your own design to be like. So that would be, which planet, if we're considering, like an interplanetary mission from Earth to some other planet in our solar system, where would you like to send your space probe? What kinds of instruments would you put on board? And you can incorporate the same kinds of instruments as the ones used on the probe that you've studied. So you feel free to use the knowledge from your presentation uh, in the bonus task if you feel like doing the bonus task. That is, if you've chosen to study, for example, Voyager 2, and you learn about this really cool instrument that Voyager 2 had on board during its mission, and that it used to take some really neat pictures or collect some really interesting data. And you think, oh man, if I could design a space probe, I would want something like that. Include that. Totally feel free to include that. And you could even, if you're not sure of if such a if such a science instrument exists, if you say, well, I would like an instrument that would give me this kind of information, then you can say that. And if you have the time and if you choose to do the bonus task, of course, then you can look up, is there any instrument that's on board any probe, the one you've chosen or something else, that can do something like what I'm picturing. So if any of you feel like doing the bonus task, that's the way that you can kind of approach it. And then what would you hope to learn? Of course, you wouldn't be certain of what exactly you would learn, but you could go in with a couple of primary questions of like, I would design this probe with these instruments to go to this planet to answer this question. Is there liquid water here? Is there life here? Is there something else? Whatever it is that you want to know more about, you can put that in there as well. So that's, if you're doing the bonus task, that's a little bit of information for you right there. So as for the duration of your presentation, whether you make it on the computer like a PowerPoint, or if you're holding up a poster board in front of the class, I'd say aim for about 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes exactly. If you end up being a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, that's okay. And if you end up, I imagine if it's 10 minutes per person, you probably wouldn't be able to get through everybody in one day. So what I would do then is whoever ends up getting an extra week would be graded a little bit more strictly, and maybe I'll ask a little extra something of those people just because they have an extra week to do it. So we can figure that out later of if everybody presents in the same week or if we split it over 2 classes back to back. But at any rate, aim for roughly 10 minutes. It can be a little bit shorter if you're not finding enough information. This is just sort of a rough idea. So it shouldn't be 3 minutes, but it also doesn't have to be like 25 minutes or anything like that. So roughly 10 minutes. You'll see I've got a little plus or minus 2 right there. So that means like 10 minutes, give or take 2 minutes. So aim for like roughly 8 to 12 minutes during your presentation. So I've got a little bit of a breakdown here in the numbers in red here on the right side of the slide. So when you're introducing the project, you should talk about, the launch date or the year at least, so we have some idea of when exactly this happened, and we can sort of build a chronology, an understanding of the sequence of when the different probes were launched, all the probes that you guys are studying. So just introduce the probe, when it was launched, where it was launched from, which space agency was involved. Was it an American project? Was it a European project? Was it a Russian project? You can, put all those things in that sort of introduction. It doesn't have to be super long. Aim for just like a minute or so, just for a quick intro. This is the probe. This is its name. This is what it looks like. This is who launched it, just to get us sort of warmed up. Then the 2 sections where you should be spending most of your time, I guess. One of them is what instruments are or were on board your probe and what do they do. So the reason I've said 2 to 3 minutes here, it doesn't have to be super, super detailed, but there generally are several interesting pieces of equipment on board these probes. And depending on the probe that you've chosen and the instruments that are on board, it might be a little bit difficult to explain kind of in normal terms. Like you might find this is the name of the instrument that's on board, but what it does isn't easy to explain. So that's why I've said 2 to 3 minutes, so that you can take your time and explain to your classmates that this is what the instrument does. So don't stress out about the name. If you've got room on your poster or in your presentation, feel free to include a picture of the instruments, and just talk a little bit about all the instruments, what they're called and what they're used for. Um, and obviously, if they've got really long and complicated names, then feel free to use an abbreviation. Like I gave the example of PEPSI, PEPSSI, on the New Horizons probe. So things like that. Just say, this is Pepsi, this is what it looks like, this is what it does, and move on to the next instrument. And you should take a couple minutes to get through all the instruments. Then the main sort of section of your presentation should be like, why should I care? Why should I care about this particular mission? What made it important? What made it special in terms of space research? What did we learn from it that we didn't know before? So, if you're researching a probe that went to, I don't know, Neptune, if you're looking at Voyager 2, which went to Neptune, um, among other planets, of course, then you could talk about, what did we not know about Neptune that we learned from the Voyager 2 space probe? Or to give an example of one of the probes that's not on the list, the Cassini probe, which I didn't put on the list for you guys last week. It spent like a decade or something around Saturn, taking a bunch of data, got some really, really interesting data and pictures, and then ultimately crashed. And the crash was intentional. But anyway, it was really sad for everybody watching it. But so talk about, what did we learn from the probe? You can put in the pictures. You can talk about, this probe took this picture, and then this is what we learned from this picture, and then move on to the next picture, or some weird graph with some data that maybe doesn't make sense to the naked eye, but if you explain it, that's what we care about, right? If you can find an explanation somewhere on the internet, on YouTube, on Wikipedia, on maybe like a NASA website or something that tells you that this is the probe, this is the data it got, and this is what we learned from that data. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what you should sort of be aiming for there. I've said this should be roughly 3 to 5 minutes. If it ends up being a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, that's okay. Just try to make sure that it's not like 1 minute per section, because then there's not going to be a lot of content there, right? If you've got a probe that, visited 4 different planets, you should be able to talk for at least 3 or 4 minutes about what we learned from such a mission, right? So hopefully that's not asking too much of you, 3 to 5 minutes to talk about what we learned from the mission. If the probe took any photos, which a lot of them did, feel free to include them, talk about the pictures, talk about what we learned from the pictures. And if there's a probe where you find a picture that didn't really have scientific value, but it was just interesting to look at, that's fine too. So include just some of that information, just so we have some nice visuals associated with the presentation. And if the mission has ended, how did it end? And if the mission hasn't ended yet, when is it expected to end? So just to sort of wrap everything up, tie it all together, how did the mission end? Because we began with how did it begin, right? When did the probe launch? So at the end, just talk about how it wrapped up. If it crashed, was it intentional? Or was it an accident? And are there any other missions that you might have read about while you were researching that are related to this one, that built on the discoveries of this one or something like that? So there's a lot of leeway in the kinds of things that you can look into while you're doing your research for this project. But this should hopefully give you a rough idea with a breakdown of how much time you should spend on each section. And of course, the bonus section, if you want to do it, it doesn't have to be long. You could do a quick 1 minute. This is where I'd like to send my probe. This is what I would call it. This is what I would hope to learn. And you're in and out, and you finish the bonus section just like that. If you have a lot of time and you do the bonus section and you get really into it, feel free to spend 2, 3, 4 minutes talking about all the details of that, if that's what you would prefer to do. So hopefully that gives you an outline. I hope I'm not going too fast at all. I want you guys to have some time to do some research. So I'm trying to keep this as quick as possible while making sure you still have all the information that you need. So let's move on. As for the deadline, the I'm I'm thinking this should be enough time. If it ends up not being enough time, we can revise it. But I'm thinking 3 weeks from when you guys are watching this video. So I'm recording this video on the evening of April the 7th. So you should be able to watch this in your class on the 8th, which would mean that the deadline is April 29th. So just before the end of the month. And that should give you enough time to finish your project since you guys have already known about it for a little while. If you happen to be watching this video the following week for some reason, if you don't, have time for this video tomorrow, or if something goes wrong with the upload or something, and you end up watching this a week later on the 15th, then the deadline will be adjusted accordingly, and you'll have an extra week at the end. So please make sure your poster or presentation is ready for the day of the presentation. Maybe I should have written in more for that point, is ready for the day of the presentation, even if we're not necessarily going to get through everybody, because we should try to get through as many people as we can in the first class, but if we do have to spill over into the next week, that's all right. Just do please make sure that you are ready to go on the 29th in the event that we have enough time to get through everybody all in the same day. So hopefully that clarifies the deadline and the duration, but let's move on. I do need to talk about the possibility of a mission that doesn't have any photos yet, because I know I did receive one request to study a mission that hasn't taken any pictures yet because it's a relatively new one. And so in that case, the adjustment of what you should talk about and how long you should talk about is here. So still talk about when the mission started, when it was launched. Same stuff with like the launch date or launch year and from where and all that. Same intro. And what instruments are on board? What are they going to be used for? Same stuff so far. The next bit is different because for the probes that have pictures and for the probes that have already completed their missions, this section of the presentation is what did we learn and what pictures do we have that we can look at. A probe that is new won't have taught us very much yet and also doesn't have any pictures. So instead, talk about what the probe is going to be used for. What do we expect to learn from it? And this section is a little bit harder in the sense of you don't just have a list ready of, if you type in a mission that's already, a probe that's already finished its mission on Wikipedia, you'll see, these are the things we learned, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Read up a little bit on those 3, 4, 5 things and talk about them in class. For a probe that hasn't actually, completed its mission yet, there's some lack of certainty, right? We don't know exactly what we're going to learn from it. We have ideas of what we would like to learn more about, but we haven't learned anything in particular just yet from such a mission. So in that case, do consider a few different possibilities for the kinds of things that we might learn. So as an example, if I had a hypothetical mission of a space probe that was going to some random comet in the outer solar system, and the purpose was to see if there's liquid water on that comet. If the mission had already finished, then I could say, well, we learned that there either was or there was not water on that comet. But if the mission hasn't ended yet and the probe is still on its way to that comet, then I should consider both possibilities. I could say, well, we might discover that there is water, in which case we'll think this, and we'll plan another mission accordingly. Or we'll find that there is no water, in which case we learn this, and we'll plan our next mission accordingly. So it's a little bit harder because instead of talking about just what you ended up learning, you should talk about a couple of different options of what you could learn and what happens if it goes a different way. What would you expect to happen if if the results are surprising, if it's not what was expected, so a little bit harder to talk as specifically um, about what has been learned from the mission because it's all potential right now, right? We haven't actually learned anything yet. There's just a lot of stuff that we could learn and hope to learn. So talk about those things. And because I'm asking you to talk about a couple of different possibilities instead of just this is what we learned, end of story, I've made the time a little bit longer. So hopefully you can talk for 4 to 6 minutes on this. This just kind of just to keep the duration consistent with everybody else. So do try to talk about this for at least 4 minutes, I'd say, on what could happen if we discover this and what could happen if we discover something else, and consider a couple of different options, right? If that's not clear, get in touch with me. We can work something out, all right? And instead of how the mission ended, because we don't know that yet, just talk about when the mission is scheduled to end. And, is it scheduled to end by just, chucking the probe way out into deep space, or is it going to stay in orbit, or is it going to crash somewhere, or what? So just sort of wrap that up. And also please discuss how this particular mission might relate to a previous one that it might be building off the findings of, or if there's another mission that's planned to launch based on the findings of this one, talk about that as well, just so we can put this current mission in the context of ongoing space research. And same deal, if you want to do the bonus section, same thing, 1 to 3 minutes. If you find that you're not getting enough content for this section of what do we expect to learn from it, that's okay, let me know. If you're struggling to find enough for this section, then what we'll do is talk as much as you can about what we expect to learn, and then also do the bonus section, just so that you end up with a project that's about the same length as everybody else's. But we can work that out if things start to go south with this bullet point here for what we expect to learn. But yeah, hopefully that covers pretty much everything. Just before I let you go, I know I've been talking for like 22 minutes, which is definitely longer than I wanted to be talking about it. But before you go, if you haven't told me yet which mission you're studying, please let me know on on email, YouTube comments, Discord, something, just to let me know which one you're studying. Because that'll make it easier for me that if you have any questions at some point, I can get you an answer much faster if I know what mission you're studying, right? So some of you have told me already, which is great. Some of you, I hope you've chosen a mission and you've just forgotten to tell me. If that's the case, just send me a quick message or leave a comment or something to let me know which mission that is. And of course, if you have any questions about the project, about the duration, about the deadline, about something I've said, maybe I contradicted myself somewhere and I told you two things that don't make sense together, let me know. I'll clear all that up for you. But yeah, hopefully that covers just about everything. So without further ado, I know I've been talking for quite a while, but you can use the rest of this lesson to continue working on your project. As I said, I'm in the middle of my final exam season, so there's no lesson for like the rest of this video. This is the end of it. Use this class to keep working on your projects, and I will have a new lesson up for you, hopefully, for the class next week. My exams end on just a couple days before your lesson would be, but we'll sort that out. So I will get a new video up in the next several days with a new actual proper lesson for you. Hopefully this clarifies some more details for the project and you have a better idea of what to aim for in terms of time and in terms of the deadline. So good luck with your work on the project and have a great weekend. I will see you all in the next video. Have a good one.